Good morning, my chess friends. Often when we play chess, we end up sacrificing a piece for material gains or a material imbalance. For instance, we might sacrifice a knight for 3 pawns. So materially it is equal, but the 3 pawns may be more favorable in an endgame position. Or even in a middle game position, it could be seen as more favorable depending on the circumstances. Well, in this game, played between Magnus Carlsen and Alexander Morozevich, I'm going to go over a very important knight sacrifice in which Magnus Carlsen does not get enough material compensation for the sacrifice. In other words, he makes a sacrifice for some material but also for a very important strategic purpose. Now I'm going to go over that strategic purpose today and explain that so that you can be aware of that concept and use it in your own games. Magnus Carlsen is playing the white side and starts off with d4. Then Morozevich replies knight f6. And after several more moves, we can see that this is going to be a King's Indian defense, fianchetto variation. To castles, knight to f3. d6, knight to c3, c5, white castles, and knight a5 is played. Knight d2 to defend the c4 pawn that was under attack. Black gains some space with e5. Then we see white fianchettoing his other bishop, or at least preparing to fianchetto it. And f6 is played. Now Magnus Carlsen at this point plays an extremely brilliant move, his knight sacrifice. Go ahead and take a few moments to look at this position and see if you can spot it for yourself. You can pause the video if you want to. In this position, Magnus Carlsen took the pawn on d6 with his knight. It must be captured back, and then we see knight e4 picking up the second pawn. So Magnus will only get 2 pawns for the knight sacrifice, but will have this very strategic and positional pass pawn on d5 that proves to be decisive. Queen d8 is played in the actual game. Notice other options to try and slow down the pawn don't really work. Queen to e7 or f7 or even d7 all lose tempos. If the queen moves out to d7, knight c5 will gain a tempo on if it moves here. Then simply d6 gains a tempo on the queen. And if the queen moves over to f7, then after d6, knight captures pawn, there's this threat of bishop to d5 pinning the queen to the king. So black is going to lose some time trying to defend against that threat. Therefore, the safest square for the queen is to put it on d8, where it can also try and help blockade the pawn. Magnus took the pawn on c5. Then f5 is played. And this is a slight mistake, it turns out, that allows Magnus to win the game. Black could have still equalized the position with queen to c7. I'm going to go ahead and show you why. It forces Magnus to retreat the knight, and after bishop d7, d6, queen d8, knight c5. We can see that black has managed to blockade the pawn, although white still has this huge attack going and pressure on b7. The position according to the computer is equal. However, I think that this position would be really hard for black to play. It's hard for a human to play it. So Magnus definitely would have an easier position to play as white. But this is equal according to the computer because it gives black enough time to stop the pawn by first kicking this knight back. Alright, but instead of that we see f5, then d6, Okay, the knight is here, so we see f5, then d6, so d7 is now a threat. Then e4. And notice here, the bishop to d7 blockade doesn't work. White can simply capture the bishop. After queen takes, queen d5 check is going to pick up the knight. And then white will simply be up by a pawn in this position. So therefore, the bishop blockade doesn't work. Black tries e4. Then we see d7, knight to f7. And here there's another idea that black could try. It doesn't work out, but it is interesting to note that after e4, d7, black could play bishop takes rook. Bishop takes h6, attacking the rook. And here, if bishop moves back to g7, there's this check. And bishop to g5. And notice here that the queen is lost. If the queen takes the bishop, then white will simply promote his pawn to a queen and be at material. So that is a devastating attack. Alright, so if that doesn't happen, after the bishop moves to h6, why not just rook f7, moving the rook out of the way. Then take, queen takes, knight takes pawn, pawn captures back, queen takes bishop, and we can see here that materially it's about equal. White has 7 pawns, black has 5, so we have a bishop and 2 pawns versus a rook. But I would like to point out that the pawn in e4 is extremely weak, and after white's next move of queen to d4, he will be able to win this pawn. Because if this pawn is defended, let's just say maybe queen here, and then rook moves over to defend the pawn, then the a7 pawn falls. So either pawn is going to fall, therefore white will be up a pawn in this position and be completely winning. So that is one idea though. Let's go ahead and reset the position. There's a bishop here, a knight here, pawn move forward. There's a pawn here, knight, and a bishop. So we had, let's see here. Yeah, so that looks about right. So after d7 is played, instead of bishop takes rook, which we saw didn't work, black tries knight to f7, rook b1, getting out of the attack, and queen e7. Pawn captures bishop, rook captures, then knight a4. And here, if we count up the material, Magnus Carlsen is currently up by a pawn, and he did go on to win